There are sounds in the forest that don't belong to the wind or the wildlife, sounds that feel deliberate, and the people who have survived hearing them all describe the same sickening realization. It knew their name. The wilderness is never truly silent. There's always the rush of air through the pines or the scuttle of something small in the undergrowth. But tonight, on Mr. Wick and Whispers, we're diving into true forest horror inspired by real events. Accounts from our national parks and deepest wilderness areas where the environment didn't just shift, it reacted. These are stories of people who didn't just hear something in the woods. They realized something had been listening to them for a very long time. And the final story is one that proves some sounds don't stop just because you've left the trees. The air inside Sequoia National Park feels thick, almost ancient, as if the massive trunks are holding up the sky itself. These trees are so monumental that they don't just block light. They seem to possess their own gravity, swallowing the sun and absorbing every ambient noise. I was miles deep, miles off the grid, sitting on a moss-covered log. The forest wasn't silent, but it was heavy, a muted compression that felt less like peace and more like patience. I was focused on my breath, in, out, until the pattern of the wood shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was the feeling that the space around me had tightened. It was the sudden, undeniable sensation of being observed, not by a deer or a bird, but by something that had been waiting for the exact moment I let my guard down. Then, the voice came. Sam. It was a soft, perfect imitation that seemed to rise from the dark bark right behind me. Before my mind could even process the sound, my body surrendered to a violent instinctual panic. A cold prickling shot up my neck, pulling the hair on my arms upright as a paralyzing chill seized my limbs. I stopped breathing. It wasn't that I chose to. It was that my diaphragm was clamped tight, refusing to move, as if to confirm that any movement, any exhalation, would betray my position. I sat, completely stiff, staring into the timber. Hello? I finally managed, my voice sounding incredibly small and brittle. The response was absolute silence, but the silence had changed. It was no longer empty. The gaps between the colossal redwoods, usually just spaces of light and leaf, now felt full. I began to scan the forest, my gaze flickering from shadow to shadow. The perspective was all wrong. These trees are so enormous that human distance markers fail. 30 feet away looks like 3 feet, or 30 yards, depending on how the trunks line up. As my eyes searched, I realized I couldn't find the pattern in the deep gloom. Was that a trunk? Or was that shadow wrong? I felt a desperate need to blink, but my eyes were too wide, too desperate to map the darkness before it moved. The feeling of being watched was no longer a chill. It was a physical weight pressing against my chest. Every shadow seemed to hold its breath. I fixated on a particularly dense cluster of redwoods about 40 yards out. The darkness between them seemed too solid, too defined. My vision was swimming from stress. I tried to make sense of the shape, to find the edges of the trunk, but I couldn't. It felt like that deep void was staring directly into me, measuring my weight, my speed, my fear. Then the voice returned. Sam. It was the same soft, impossible clarity, but this time, it came from the exact void I was watching. I stood up, but I didn't turn around. My body wouldn't let me break eye contact with that darkness. To turn away felt like an invitation to be taken. Every cell in my body was screaming that to move too fast would break the fragile stalemate. I began to back up, my eyes locked on the shadowed gap, waiting for the massive void to step into the light. My boots crunched rhythmically on the needle-strewn floor. Step back, step back. The second my heel struck the maintained dirt path of the trail, the atmospheric pressure broke. It was instantaneous. The weight on my chest lifted. I stood on the path, the safe, engineered world, and looked back. The void between the trees was still there. It didn't move onto the path. Whatever had named me knew it couldn't cross the line I had just drawn. It just stayed in the ancient timber, waiting for me to step back off the path, and continuing to stare with an intensity that I can still feel on the back of my neck to this day. The second story takes place deep inside Glacier National Park, far enough from the trailheads that when night falls, the darkness feels absolute. There is no light pollution, no distant hum of engines, just a complete, suffocating blackness. I was solo camping that night. One small tent, one sleeping bag, and a fire that had long since collapsed into a bed of glowing, dying embers. I fell asleep to the sound of the wind, but waking up, that's what stays with me. I didn't wake up to a noise. I woke up because the air inside the tent suddenly felt crowded. My eyes snapped open. The interior was a dim grayish blur, the moonlight struggling to penetrate the rainfly. Then I heard it, just inches from my head on the other side of the fabric, breathing. It wasn't the heavy huffing of a bear or the panting of a coyote. It was slow, rhythmic, and terrifyingly human. My body locked up instantly. This is the part people don't tell you about fear. It's a physical weight. My chest felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand. My lungs seizing because I was terrified that the mere sound of a breath would signal my life to whatever was standing there. My heart didn't just beat, it pounded against the floor of the tent. A frantic, wet thudding that I was certain could be felt through the ground. Then, a whisper. "Robert." The sound didn't come from the woods. It was pressed right against the nylon. The vibration of the voice rattling the fabric near my ear. It was soft, patient. It sounded exactly like someone I loved. A voice so familiar, it made my stomach drop into a cold, sickening void. I squeezed my eyes shut, a useless childlike reflex, praying that if I couldn't see it, it couldn't see me. But then the moon shifted, or the thing moved, and a shadow began to bleed across the wall of the tent. It was human-shaped, but wrong. The proportions were stretched, the neck too long, the shoulders peaked at sharp, unnatural angles. It didn't move like a person shifting their weight. It was unnervingly still, a static silhouette cast against the thin fabric. The shadow was so dark, it seemed to pull the light out of the tent. I watched paralyzed, as a long, slender shadow of a finger traced a slow line down the zipper of the tent flap. The sound of the finger dragging against the nylon was a dry, rasping hiss. I waited for the zipper to move. I waited for the fabric to tear. I waited for the fight to finally kick in, but I was pinned by the sheer wrongness of the silhouette. And then, the shadow just blended away. No footsteps receding into the brush, no snapping twigs. Just a sudden, hollow silence that felt heavier than the breathing had been. By morning, the ground outside was undisturbed. There were no footprints in the soft dirt, no crushed grass. But I know what I saw. I know the way that shadow didn't have a head that looked quite right. And I know how close it was. Close enough that if I had reached out, I would have felt the heat of it through the wall. The final story comes from a remote stretch of the redwood curtain, where the trees grow so impossibly tall they seem to weave together, blocking out the sun and stripping away any sense of direction. I was hiking alone in the late afternoon, that treacherous time of day when the light doesn't just fade, it retreats. The first time I heard it, it was faint, a glitch in the silence. Andrew, I stopped walking. My body didn't wait for a reason to panic. It just did. My chest constricted into a tight, airless knot, and a wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. I listened. Nothing. Just the redwoods. Ancient, looming, and somehow expectant. I tried to tell myself it was a bird or the wind twisting through the canopy, but the logic felt thin. Then it came again, closer. Andrew? My heart shifted from a steady beat to a frantic, uneven thrumming that made my hands go numb and cold. I spun around, scanning the dense ferns and the massive grooved trunks. Nothing. But the feeling of being hunted had solidified into something physical, a prickly heat crawling across my skin. That's when I realized the pattern. Every time I took a step, a second footfall echoed from the brush behind me. If I sped up, it sped up. If I stopped, the silence that followed was too sudden, like a predator holding its breath. It wasn't just following me. It was adjusting to me, learning the rhythm of my panic. The fear became a white-hot spike in my brain. No more curiosity, no more hello? Just the primal screaming command to run. And I did. I bolted. My vision narrowed into a sharp tunnel. The forest on either side becoming a chaotic smear of dark bark and grasping branches. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I was terrified that if I turned, I would see exactly what was calling me, and the sight would finish what the fear had started. Branches whipped against my face, slicing skin, but I didn't feel the pain. My lungs were burning, each breath a jagged gasp that tasted like copper. And the voice, it kept calling. It didn't get louder, which was the worst part. It just stayed constant. Andrew? It was right behind my ear. I could feel the displacement of air, a cold draft against the back of my neck, as if something was leaning in while it ran, its face inches from my skin. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flicker, a pale, elongated shape weaving through the trunks at a speed no human could maintain. It moved with a fluid, terrifying grace, effortlessly matching my desperate sprint. The trees began to thin, the trailhead, light, the gravel of the parking lot. I burst out of the timber and collapsed onto the gravel, my heart hammering so hard against my ribs I thought they might snap. I turned once, gasping for air. Nothing. The forest edge was a wall of deep green and impenetrable shadow. The transition was absolute. Whatever had been breathing on my neck had vanished the moment I hit the open space. But sometimes, when the house is quiet and the sun is setting, I still hear it. Soft, patient. A voice that sounds exactly like mine, whispering from the trees, waiting for me to lose my way again. There's a reason park rangers tell you to stay on the trail. It's not just about the terrain. It's because the moment you step off the path, you cease to be a spectator and you become a participant. In every story we've shared tonight, the pattern is the same. A single step into the brush, a shift in the air, and the cold, heavy certainty that you are no longer alone. If this brand of forest horror leaves you looking over your shoulder, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Mr. Wick and Whispers. We have more accounts coming soon from those who heard something calling from the deeper timber and live to tell us about it. Drop a comment below and let us know which of these stories made your skin crawl the most. Sleep well tonight. And remember, sometimes the safest place in the forest is the path you never leave.